Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back to the Pennsylvania and Berwind, and welcome back to the Highland area on the P&B. Today, we're going to be doing some work on sweets candy in Highland here, and we're going to be doing things a little bit differently from what the original P&B had it set up as. The original P&B paperwork says that the sweets candy is a small operation that is served by a short spur. In times past, the operation received inbound raw sugar via covered hopper rail cars from the Universal Sugar Company on the Vonnie branch. However, operations at the plant have been very slow in recent years, with no rail traffic in over 18 months. Well, we're going to change that a little bit on this particular version of the P&B, and we're going to be making the freight traffic, I guess, kind of limited, which you'll see in a moment here. But to kick things off, I wanted this to be a bigger building. So what I'm starting off is kitbashing a bunch of warehouses that I have to sort of create a larger factory. So my concept here is that this used to be a much more prosperous rail-served facility, but in current times, it's only receiving a couple freight cars maybe every week, maybe a couple times a month, and most of the traffic is driven by trucks. So the main takeaway from this was actually suggested to me by one of my patrons, and that was to move the Sweets Candy Company away from the main line a little bit further, and he had suggested putting it somewhere down this spur past the brewery. And I love that idea, and it allowed me to add a little bit of history to this branch into this industry, which you'll see shape up in a few moments here. But originally on the P&B, it would have been located just right off the main line, sort of trackside, in sort of a model railroad style. So doing it this way and bringing it a little bit further away from the main line makes the scene a little bit deeper and adds some more visual interest to the overall Highland area. And we'll see that shape up in a few moments here. But getting started with this, I took a handful of buildings that I had kicking around, and I wanted to make this, again, like I said, look like it was a much more prosperous factory at points in the past than it currently is. So I took a few of these buildings, I spliced them together a little bit, made this really long warehouse, and I'm trying to add the corn syrup I guess, unloading area. One of the things that I really wanted to pay attention to with this spot was to have maybe a little bit of a different track configuration. So I was working with the shape of the building here. I liked that this warehouse has that kind of corner cut on it. So I wanted to work with that a bit and get some interesting track shapes going on here. Just to mix things up a little bit. There's so much on the P&B that's very linear and parallel and flat. So adding a little bit of depth and a little bit of shape wherever I can, and not working with the grid is definitely really important to try to do going forward. And that's something that I'm going to be focusing on quite a bit. So this first part of the facility here is going to be the corn syrup unloading area. I have absolutely no idea what this is supposed to look like in real life and how this functions, but I thought adding a few pipes and tanks and a tank car unloading pump thing hose would work pretty well. So the next part of this is going to be the boxcar loading. I can't remember, we discussed this on my Patreon chat, like what the inbound and outbound commodities was going to be. I think I want to say it's inbound corn syrup and maybe excuse me, I'm still suffering from COVID here. So I'm doing my best to talk. It would be one boxcar of inbound, maybe paper from the paper mill or something like that. So I wanted to keep things really sort of compact and minimal. So one boxcar, one tank car, maybe once a week or something like that. But I wanted this area to feel overall a bit neglected and a bit more abandoned. And as you'll see towards the end of this episode, I actually stretched the spur a little bit further down the module to make it appear a bit like an abandoned spur, industrial spur. Like maybe this continued off to serve a whole bunch of other industries beyond the Highland area. And you know that the whole P&B and the thing that makes it so interesting is that it has history. And there's a lot of different areas that are, you know, out of business or out of service or you know, just have that history, and that's what kind of grounds it in reality, in my opinion. So I wanted to keep up with that, so I had a bunch of abandoned tracks here at these other warehouses. I don't know what they were, but they are not in service anymore, and I think that adds a very appealing visual interest, especially for the P&B. So just working in some abandoned spurs where it would sort of make sense. And again, kit bashing a lot of these buildings because I'm so bored with all the structures and, you know, that I've been using. And, you know, we're just limited with what we have at the moment, and that's just the way it is. So trying to make new buildings out of other buildings and kit bashing them and, you know, just bringing new life to the same stuff that we've used over and over again, especially on something that is as big as the P&B. You're going to see a lot of the same stuff. So any chance that I have to kind of mix things up a little bit is a great opportunity to just make, you know, add some variety is really what I'm trying to say. All right, had to take a break to cough there for a minute. Sorry about that. So anyway, with this area, it took me a while to do this build. I'm not going to lie. I started this probably back in November. And at the time of the release of this is now January. It took me a little while to get going on this because I, for one, just haven't had I've just had a lack of time to do it, and then I got really sick with this COVID nonsense. So it's just been a little bit scattered, and that sort of shows in the video process a little bit, but I'm not too concerned about it. But I want you guys to know that this did take a little bit of time to build and to get inspired and that sort of thing. A lot of these builds, they look like they come really easy and really quickly, and maybe I do them overnight, but the truth is this took probably 2 months to do, just like piecemealed here and there together as I started to get some ideas. So speaking of ideas, one of the things that I was looking for when I was working on this area, I try to look to the real world whenever I can for inspiration. I tend to build better when I can, I don't want to say copy something from the real world, but look at some example of what I'm trying to build from the real world and take, you know, samplings of, you know, real life things and bring them into the game. So I started looking at Scranton, Pennsylvania, because that has like the same kind of vibe that I'm going for with this area. Scranton just has like this tangle of track all over the place. There's a lot of abandoned industries, abandoned track, and everything, you know, it's very similar to the look that I'm going for here. So I had Google Earth open on Scranton, and I was kind of thumbing around for ideas about how I could shape up this area and design it a little bit more real life-like. So you'll see that develop in a moment. But a lot of what I was getting inspired from was some of these areas that have like mixed commercial and industrial spaces. So what I mean by that is you'll have some of these big warehouses, and then there'll be a couple streets over, there'll be some regular homes where people live. And it kind of seems out of place because you'll have some of these warehouses, and then right next door will be like somebody's home. So that's what I'll start to work in a moment here. I'm getting ahead of myself because I lost my timeline on my view. But you know, that's sort of what I started working towards. Obviously, at this point, I'm trying to bring in some of these really lovely textures to show that this facility in the back here is no longer being used. So the parking lot or the warehouse space or whatever it is has been neglected, and that pavement is all beat up and is getting overgrown. So I always like using a lot of textures to blend together and add some more, you know, literally texture to the scene, and I think that makes a major difference. One of the other things that I'm doing a lot in this area is adding small like hills and divots in the terrain, because as I had said a moment ago, a lot of the P&B is built kind of flat for the most part, and that's just my fault because when I first laid the whole thing out, I didn't want to do terrain. I didn't really know how to do it, so I laid the whole thing out flat. So a lot of it is flat. Whatever. So I'm trying to work in some of these height differentials here. And a lot of times I've noticed, especially when I was looking at Scranton, Pennsylvania, along the right-of-way, you'll see the track it's not necessarily really in a cut, but it is below grade a little bit, or the terrain around it is raised a little bit. So I wanted to work that into this area. And, you know, sort of like when they graded out the track, they kind of had to push out some of the earth, and they just moved it off to the side. So that was sort of the look that I was going for there, and you'll see me work a little bit more of that in as we go. So at this point, I knew I needed to bring in some kind of a road to get into this facility here. I don't think I spend a whole lot of time on this on camera. I just try to get the basics in so I know where things are going to go. And I think moving forward, what I'm going to start to do is lay out my roadways in my towns and in my big industrial areas before I really start working in buildings and other things like that. Sort of like what you would do if you were playing City Skylines, where you lay out your roads and your road grid first, and then you start working in your buildings. So I think that that's something I'm going to experiment with in the next few videos, or the next time I have a lot of time to spend on working on this route. I think it helps to get the infrastructure down, so then you kind of have an idea of like, where things should be and what the layout of everything is. So we'll see how that goes. Because the other thing is, when I started to build this area here, I didn't really know what the layout of it was going to be, and I still don't, but I'm starting to get a better idea of what I want to do and how I want things to flow. I don't want Highland to be a heavy, big, dense city or anything like that. I want it to maybe feel like a part of a bigger city, and we're just sort of on the outskirts of it. But I don't know. We'll see how I work things together. Like I said, looking at Scranton on Google Earth while doing this gave me a lot of ideas. And this is one of them here. So I get a little sidetracked and take my attention away from the actual candy factory for a little bit because I was sort of inspired to fill in this area adjacent to the tracks. And going with my idea of this sort of mixed zoning, I start working in some of these like auto repair shops, or not scrap yards, but like auto repair shops. Like if you go on Google and you look at like any major town or major city, there's always these areas that for some reason there's a whole bunch of like auto facilities like grouped together. And it tends to be in like somewhat of the industrial or older parts of town. So that's what I'm going for here. So I laid out three of these auto mechanic type facilities. And now I'm starting to work in some of these older looking homes to just make this feel like it's, this mixed zoning area, that maybe these houses have been here since the town was first formed, and then the industry kind of came around it. I don't really know. I'm not a city planner and I'm not a historian, so I don't know exactly how these things developed, but just looking at it, that's what I'm going for. So we're going to fill in this area. I don't spend a lot of time detailing it. I just wanted to rough it in a bit. We're adding these auto clinics or auto whatever places, buy and sell used cars or repair parts, whatever. Essentially, it's just going to look like an absolute mess over here with scrapped cars and debris and junk and all that kind of thing. So that's what I'm working on here. Across the street, I start working in some buildings, some houses, and I can't remember if I did that on camera or not at this point, to be perfectly honest with you. But it starts shaping up, and the look is pretty cool. I wish some of these shrubs were a little bit smaller, a little bit more low-lying, because they're just massive. They're like woodsy type undergrowth shrubs and that sort of thing. But it works pretty decently for this area. So again, what I did was I put in the roadways over here, and then I put the buildings in. So I think that maybe, like I said before, going forward, if I work in the roads and then I work in my buildings and my structures, that might be a little bit more of a organic way of developing some of my scenes and some of these areas as time goes on. And I think probably after this video, I'm going to come back to Highland and just spend a day or two doing exactly that, and just putting roads all over the place and figuring out what the layout of the rest of the town is going to be, because we still have to add in a scrapyard and an intermodal facility. I don't think it's going to be an intermodal facility. I think I'm just going to do like a big team track. So we still have 2 or 3 more industries that we have to work in on the other side of the tracks of the main line, which has absolutely nothing over there at all. There's no buildings, there's no trees, there's nothing over there. So totally blank slate that we'll get to play with. So at this point here, this is where I'm starting to extend out, quote unquote, the old right of way. So I wanted it to look like they pulled up the tracks. They left just enough of the spur here, so Trainz could service the beer company, the beer brewing facility, because this is a tail track to be able to back a train back down into into Highland Brewing. So anyway, I wanted this to look like an old right-of-way, and you know how that looks. Like, they pull up the track, they pull up the ties, but you can always tell where that scar is. Even if there's no ties there, there's always like a deep scar in the earth because of the sub-road bed or whatever it is that they do to grade railroad tracks. It's always there, or the way that the trees grow in. So that's what I was sort of hinting at here. I thought it'd be nice to add in some of the ties and make it look like some of them were left in there and they just pulled up the rail, and that was that. So at this point, I'm starting to work in some of the background trees. Obviously, I'm just copying and pasting from another area on the PNB and just working on filling in the background as I can. Obviously, I need to do some more work on the terraforming in the back there because it's just cut out. But again, I have to decide what I'm going to do in terms of how deep I want this scene to go. A lot of the PNB is only like 1 or 2 tiles wide. So I did that because I didn't want to be, spending a whole bunch of time doing background scenes. But my thought has changed a little bit on that. My idea on that has changed. So I don't necessarily mind doing background scenes if it adds more detail to the overall, route and history and stuff like that. So I have to make a decision about how much further I want to model this scene, how deep I want, if I want to add some more tiles, and what the terrain is going to look like. Because, typically what I'll do is I'll just raise up the terrain and make some kind of a mountain that, tapers into the backdrop or just disappears and is far enough away that you don't, see the edge of the world. So now I'm drawing my attention back to the main facility of the Sweets Company, which maybe we need to come up with a better name than just Sweets Candy. I don't mind Sweets Candy, but if anybody has any suggestions, I'm open to it. And again, I kind of wasn't so inspired for detailing this warehouse facility itself, so I just sort of sprinkled down a few tractor trailers and a few things like that. Maybe I'll do a live stream or something like that where we'll detail this area a little bit more, but I really just roughed in some of the details. And by this point in the video, it had been like 3 months since I had started it. So I was like, you know what? I got to wrap this up and get things, finish things up so that we can get this video out and actually make some semblance of sense by the time it's done. So I decided to add in a few more details, just a few more pieces of grass and some trees and that sort of thing, and just roughing out what the rest of the area is going to look like. And we'll come back and we'll do some more work around here. But that is pretty much going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Sorry that it's been so long in between videos. I just haven't really had the time. Anyway, I hope you guys had a happy new year and happy holidays and all that fun stuff. And I'll see you guys in the next one.